Welcome to the Speak Hope Now podcast, and we're excited to have Andrew Boberick here with us today. He has an incredible testimony of God's love and grace, salvation, and he also has an incredible testimony of what God can do in someone's life who's willing to lay themselves down and follow and serve the Lord with all of their heart, soul, mind, and strength. Andrew, it's great to see you here today.
Yeah.
Talk to me a little bit about your family upbringing. You have a powerful testimony, don't you? With your family history there and how God brought you closer to Him and how you got saved. Tell me a little bit about that testimony there with your family.
Yeah. So, the term I kind of coined is I didn't grow up in a Christian household, and it wasn't non-Christian. It was like an unequally yoked household. And I say that because my parents shared separate beliefs. So my mom was active in the faith, was super loyal and obedient and loving of the Lord. And so as much as that wasn't always in the household as far as the practices and the things that we did and verses on the wall and stuff, she really lived that out just, every day by the way that she cared for me, but also cared for everybody. And
what was your mom's name?
Her name was Michelle.
Michelle.
Yeah. Yep. So she was a stay-at-home mom, and so plenty of time just receiving her tender love and care and seeing that, though, extend outside of the household the same way that she kind of laid her life down for her children and her family. She did it for everyone.
Sure.
And so growing up, I was in church. I would go with her. I was always believed in God and liked the atmosphere. However, it just never really stuck with me. It never really stood out as, hey, this is, about daily relationship with the Lord. It's not just about believing, but following, so she gets sick with cancer. This is kind of the bulk of the story. She gets sick with cancer when I was in 8th grade. And then for about 4 years, she had battled cancer. So the initial diagnosis was she had stage 4 breast cancer, which basically for the progression of how cancer works, stage 4 is pretty far along. Right. Very low percentile of people find themselves being diagnosed at that stage. And so right off the bat, it wasn't looking great. But the thing about it was I kind of knew my mom's spirit and knew whatever path that, that was going to lead her down, she was going to be for it. And honestly, it was, of course, shocking and very saddening news, but it was like, at that point, I'm 13 or 14, and just knowing how my mom just goes about things, I was already hopeful that, she's going to beat this, you know what I mean? Not even just trying to be optimistic, but I was like, if there's anyone who's going to have cancer and beat it at this stage, it's going to be her. And she did. Wow. She beat it after about a year and a half of battling stage 4, which entailed losing all her hair, having a breast removed, having a pump put in, a lot of different things. She just kept going. She did her appointments. She rested when she needed to, but she still, other than a few times where maybe, in the early onset of receiving chemo and that kind of taking her off her feet, or just different times when she wasn't feeling her greatest, she maintained her role. Wow. She was a stay-at-home mom. Took care of her kids, took care of her family, had help when she needed it, but she just did her thing. And even in the church, did her thing still. Attended church, but also she was the one woman worship team. So wow. Up there with her wig on, the fake breast, and just singing, praising God, and, nothing changed.
Wow.
And so I know that now that I've come to the Lord, which wasn't necessarily a direct result of her passing, but definitely correlates for sure, because I know that as a kid, all throughout my life, but specifically through that time of her battling cancer, I was just watching somebody, fearlessly and joyfully take on something that, really is scary, and is challenging and is disheartening, and, in the back of your mind, can lead to death. So, that had an impact on me for sure. It was almost subconscious that I'm just observing somebody do this. And now I understand what it was. Of course, it was the Lord giving her that strength, but it was also her faithfulness and her trusting in the Lord that there was a plan to that, you know what I mean?
Sure.
And there clearly was, because so she battles cancer. I said she beats the breast, and then she has almost about a year where she's cancer free, and things are going great. But then suddenly, getting real close to about a year of that time, she is then re-diagnosed. She starts to experience some strokes and seizures and different symptoms that were a little bit concerning. So through testing and appointments, she came to find that the cancer, which makes sense, it was at stage 4 right off the jump, that it had metastasized to her brain. So she goes from stage 4 breast cancer to brain cancer, both pretty intense. The probability, the odds are stacked against her pretty heavily. But once again, same approach, doing everything she can to just maintain her daily life, maintain just taking care of her family and being a good role model.
Right.
But of course, with the brain, it was, once it really kind of got underway, even as she was actively going to treatment and doing things to try to beat that as well, it got to a point where it was, really taking hold. And so it was August of 2015. I remember I was visiting my family who lives in Virginia, and it was like the day that I had planned to come home was the same day that she was hospitalized because she had like a pretty severe stroke. And then really from that point on, it was just a constant kind of in and out of the hospital journey from August until when she passed away, which was October 14th of 2015.
Wow.
And because then you could see once the brain cancer was, just really, really taking hold, the brain's a whole different story that dictates everything that a person can do, and their mind capacity, their functionality physically. And so, it was a slow kind of dwindling down of her body, if you will, and her health. But, still same thing, that fearless, joyful kind of approach to it.
And how old were you then when she passed away?
So I was 17 when she passed away. Yeah. And that was the beginning of my senior year of high school. So of course what's to be around the corner is, college and then adulting. And so as much as
my dad passed away a month before your mom in 2015. So I was in my early 40s, right?
Yeah.
You were 17 years old.
Mm-hmm.
Like I can't imagine losing a significant parent in my teen years.
Yeah, me either, but it happened,
Yeah.
And
so what did you do? How did you go down this path of stabilizing yourself? And did you have questions for God?
Yeah, well, so this is another thing that I at the time experienced, but in the, as time passed and I've come to the Lord, it's been something that I've reflected on to actually understand. But I always say this to people when I'm talking about this story, and now having an understanding of God and where he fits in and how he just works in our lives. But so the day that my mom passed was, basically about a week's worth of time steadily in the hospital, because as it really got to a point where it wasn't, like I said, she was at times in the hospital, out of the hospital, trying to just see what was going on. But this particular week stretch of time leading up to her passing was just her steadily in the hospital, because then she eventually was in a coma. Mm-hmm. And so it was about a week of just staking out at the hospital and just kind of seeing where things were going. And eventually it was, I think it was like 4 a.m. On that day that she had passed away while we were all in the waiting room sleeping. But I remember that I had never, came to the terms of looking at things, she's been here, for the last almost week, she's been in a coma. This has never happened. It's looking like it's probably the end. I waited until it happened to believe that. But with that being said, I just remember the morning of, once, my uncle had woken us up and let us know what had happened, there was just a peace there. There was a peace. It was, I was of course crushed and sad and finally facing the reality that she had lost the battle and was gone. But yeah, I just remember driving home. It's like, 5 a.m. or so. Like I think the sun was starting to come up, and I was just in the car, and there was just peace there.
Right.
And it was like weird. I almost felt a little guilty because I'm like, why am I so okay with this, and so stable. But I realized that once again, she never, all along the 4 years of battling cancer, never really led us to feel bad for her or to fear. Just the way that she went about it was something that prepared me in itself. And, and not just the 4 years of battling the cancer, but her whole life was an example of fearlessness and strength and selflessness, even while having plenty of reasons to, focus on herself and her problems and the situation, but she never did. So yeah, that was definitely the Lord. And just how I describe it, I never really came to a point where I was like, in this like deep grieving process. And sometimes I wonder if I, maybe needed to do that, or it was just really happening, internally and subconsciously. I don't really know, but I just know that I was like, I believe that clearly since she had passed, that there was a reason for that,
Right.
and like in the worldly context, a lot of people say the thing like, only the good die young and things like that. But I really did just like kind of construct my own belief that I was like, based off of what 17 years of being raised by her, was like, it felt like, if I had her for the rest of my life, it wouldn't make any difference. 17 years was enough. Clearly she had done something that she was meant to do, because I was equipped to go on and live life, just based off of those 17 years of having her. And I'm grateful for that, because there's a lot of people that maybe don't have a mother at all, or they have a mother for their entire life, and they could say it was like, it didn't really equate to much. But for me, 17 years was like a lifetime. So from there, though, her absence definitely was very, very difficult, Sure. It wasn't like facing the fact that she was gone and that just absolutely crushing me, but I realized it was like the role that she played and provided, and her being honestly all forms of love and support and understanding and encouragement and just everything that was taken out of my life. And I am 17, so I'm an adult and I'm mature and I'm capable of much, but at the same time, I never did life without her on my side. So
yeah,
I go into college and I go into adulting eventually, and I realized that as things got harder and more stressful and challenging, that I was alone in essence. As much as I had a family and other people around me, she was definitely the support system. So that, of course, led to going out and, stumbling a whole bunch and stumbling all on my own, not having her to turn to and to give me wisdom or, give me some support. I was just kind of on my own that I tried to figure this thing out. And that's a lot of what leads me to coming to the Lord, is that I made a lot of bad decisions. I struggled a lot. And I think a lot of it was probably trying to fill a void that I didn't know was there. And the void really was God. But at that time, having not known God, the void was trying to probably fill my mom's presence, which very much so was of the Lord as well. But so it's 2019, and I'm in my fall semester of college, and my lifelong best friend, who was honestly down in a rut just like myself, if not worse, he had made the decision to start to follow the Lord. And so as we spent time together and would be talking, here and there, as he was kind of started this journey with the Lord, he was always sharing with me, the good news, if you will, and sharing with me just the things that he knew I would be, open to and receptive to. And he also would always pray for me when we were together. And that definitely took root It didn't happen immediately, but from that point on, I saw, his passion for this new path of life, and also was experiencing and witnessing how it was really changing him as a person, and certainly, slowly getting him out of this dark place he was in. And
Incredible.
So, we kept on talking around, the Lord and the faith, and I also was watching him, change his life, drastically. And so it took about over a year, but come like 2020, the end of 2020, I had already graduated college. I was working in the professional world now for about 6 months. It was, that voice was in my head. There was this prompting on my heart. And so, I remember like come 2021, I had finally moved down to, like the greater Philadelphia area for work purposes. But I started to, really look at my life and still see that although I've had this awareness of the Lord and faith and what that could do for me, I still wasn't living it. I was living in the world, and I was separate from God. But my friend also had given me a book that he told me just to read, and I remember it was called, I can't remember if it's called Saints or Becoming Saints, but it was by Addison Bevere. If you're familiar with John Bevere, it's one of his children. But I eventually cracked that thing open, I remember, and the whole point of cracking that open was like, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know what this looks like. Yeah. I don't really know where to begin. I have this book. I feel like this might be, a little bit less overwhelming to take a look at than trying to dive into the Bible, and I can't go to church right now because it's COVID, everything's locked down. But so I started to read that book, and then from there it was just it was underway.
I find that to be a testimony over and over and over again when it comes to grief. Grief is a major gut punch, a blow to the psyche. Yeah. Right. And it can cause someone to go off path, off course in a major way. And, I hear people share quite often, and even in my own testimony of suffering with grief, it's caused a lot of my family members to go down the path of getting off course with their faith and within family relations. Right. And it can also influence, our present situation where we are innerly having some oppositional defiance towards God. Yeah. And that's really the questions that come into play. How can a loving and gracious God do this to such a wonderful person? I know my dad, didn't have any alcohol or use any drugs. Right. And, somehow he passed away with a genetic disorder abruptly. And even though I was older and I had a better understanding of life and, the whole cycle of living, it still didn't lessen that blow. And it didn't lessen the blow in our family either. But at least I had enough footing to be able to say, okay, God, I'm going to give this to you, and I'm going to continue following after you, and I'm going to do more and taking this baton and moving forward in the faith and continuing his legacy, my dad's legacy. Yeah. Not that I was doing it for him. Right. I'm doing it for the Lord. Right. But when you're so young, at 17 years of age, I can see how it would get you off track. That support not being there. Right. That faith example not being there. But it's powerful of how God brings someone into our life. Yeah. And here you are pursuing college. You thought you had a purpose. I remember you telling me you played baseball. Talk to me a little bit about baseball. Yeah. What was baseball for you in your teenage years? And then did you say that you had some offers going to college? Yeah. So, baseball was always a huge part of my childhood and teenage years. And this friend specifically, like I said, he was a lifelong best friend that I grew up with, who went to my school, but also was, right by my side all throughout the years of playing baseball. He was always on my team. And so that bonded us, but also, just our personalities and just in the small town that we lived in, we were just always so close. And what's interesting too, though, this is got a little bit of a side note, but in regards to faith and how he ends up being the one that kind of, encourages me to follow the Lord is, despite the, church attendance that I had, going to my mom's church, which he attended a different one,
all in all, my church experiences, didn't involve much other than just going to Sunday, events. But with this particular friend, there was in middle school for, I think it was like 7th through 9th grade, we went to this, but his church always attended like a youth conference called PCTC in Harrisburg. Okay. And so although, he was probably in the same place with me as far as like being around church and going to that and, sure. and how he, made that a part of his life. It was lukewarm. It was just something that he was open to and was familiar with. But the conference for us was just like, something fun, something cool, exciting. So though every year it came around, he always invited one friend, and that was me. So it's interesting to see how, like, I can remember just vaguely what those conferences consisted of, but there was worship and there was workshops and there was, plenty of prayer going around. So I've reflected on that too, to see it's like, although for us, we were there for, not the wrong reasons, but not for the reasons that we were meant to, we were still there. We were still in the presence of God. Yeah. And, we always enjoyed it and felt something that I see, like, the Lord, if anything, kind of exposing us to together. And it makes sense why we were friends like we were, because clearly there was something more that God had planned. So it's like later on, it's like it all makes sense.
Seed, spiritual formation early on in your life. And, again, if it wasn't for your friend inviting you to those events, you probably would have never been exposed, right?
Yeah, no, not in that way, because it was beyond just, Sunday service at church. But so, yeah, he shares those things with me, and it really did.
So you guys played baseball together. Yeah. And then did you go to college? Did you play baseball in college? So, you said you had some offers. Where?
Yeah, so back to baseball. So I was getting ready to, take on my senior year, and as many people know, that's when you're figuring out colleges, deciding what's my degree, what are my options. And I didn't apply to like a million places, and honestly, that's something in itself. Like, for the time that my mom was really, struggling with her cancer and eventually passes away, that beginning first few months of school is when you're like really trying to get those things locked in. So as I look back too, I see how, like, I probably wasn't as diligent in making my even future decisions for college all that much, because there was just so much going on. I kind of just, it went to the wayside, and just whatever came, is what I've pursued. So I remember I've only applied to a few colleges, and Wilkes University here locally was one that, offered me an athletic scholarship for baseball, but nothing crazy. It was like just some money. That's how they oftentimes draw people in, for education purposes, is through athletics.
What's Division II?
They're Division III.
Are they Division III?
Yeah. So it was just a matter of, okay, like, what do I see being most important to me? Am I going to college for baseball, or am I going to college for, schooling purposes? Sure. And so the other school that I had applied to was, Penn State, and I was accepted to both, but one had the baseball as a part of the offer. One was just, to go there and to study finance for both. So I remember I wrestled with that for a while to decide, but I was like, Penn State, they have more of what I'm looking for, scholastically. They have a really good, business college called Schmiel. And so I just kind of made a decision. It's like, well, if I go to Wilkes and play baseball, it'll just purely be for the love of the game. It's not going to be because I think it's taken me anywhere. And I don't know how well I'm going to be able to balance, collegiate athletics and school. And also freshly just had that whole situation with my mom take place, to where it was like, I could only really fathom taking on school. And I also knew that with that situation came, more responsibility probably for me in terms of like my family, and what I might need to do there. And so that's actually kind of after I decided, all right, I'm not going to go to Wilkes, I'm going to go to Penn State. The plan was to go to main campus and do my 4 years there, but also kind of recognizing the circumstances. It was only my brother, or I should say my dad, my sister, and myself in the household. My brother had moved out, and when I looked at that, I was like, well, if I go away to state college right away, and this having just happened, I don't know what's going to happen here. I don't, my dad always worked full time, and I knew he would continue to do that. And being the breadwinner was his role, but being the housekeeper and the parent, the primary parent, wasn't really his thing. And my sister, she's 4 years younger than myself. And also out of all of us siblings, you know, she being the girl, but being the baby was like, even come like at 8th grade when my mom passed, like she was always at my mom's hip. So it was just like, I was thought about that. And then that influenced my decision to split my years at Penn State 2 and 2 years at a branch campus. So here in Wilkes-Barre, I went to Penn State Wilkes-Barre for 2 years, did my, you know, gen eds, if you will. And then the last 2 finished out at Penn State. And so,
and taking care of her.
Yeah, just trying to be there. Cause I even though when I really look back, like college and the busyness of that, you know, compromised me a lot to where how active I really was and kind of stepping up and filling my mom's role. And I don't know how much I did that. And that wasn't really the plan. I just knew though, if I was around, I could be helpful in some way, shape, or form.
And that grief could have caused you to go down a path of saying, forget all this. I'm not going to stick around. I'm going to get out of here. I'm going to get as far away as I can, and not help my sister and not help my family. But somehow God just, you know, kept some of the wheels on for you, kept some of those lug nuts tight, and took you down a path where you eventually graduated from college, right? And this is what I think the beautiful story is for you. And I'm just going to piece together a little bit. I'll let you continue putting the rest of the puzzle together. But here you come out of this extreme grief, losing your mother, right? Your younger sister lost her best friend. And you're going off to college. You stick around, help your sister. Your best friend comes to find the Lord. And you find the Lord in the process, right? Even if it was a little after you graduated from college. But here you have all this experience of sports, your mom's faith that she basically passed down, you know, wanting you to receive it before she passed away. And God pulls all of this together for you, right? He pulls it all together for you. And you start reading this book that your friend gave you, and it starts to make sense. Tell me about that book. Tell me about what happened. You're out in Philly. You're reading that book. God speaks to you in a real way. Talk to me about that.
It was just, like I said, from the time that I really became aware of this idea of faith, and at that point in 2019, you know, it was at the end of you know, my college run. And so, you know, a lot of the, I would say in those like 4 years of college is where a lot of things I think, impacted me negatively. One, because school was just super stressful. So I came to realize like I've never, and I didn't even know once again until really reflecting back, but anxiety and stress and sleep deprivation, all these things, like never a problem growing up. But, you know, college just in itself, trying to maintain grades and perform was a lot. And also though too, the atmosphere that college brings of, you know, the different things that go on in the extracurricular hours and all the different choices you can make or cannot make. You know, I didn't make the best of ones and had that stress of schooling, and also had actually a relationship that I think once again I allowed myself to experience and stay in for much longer than I should have, because once again I'm at that age where you're curious and you want to start dating, but also I didn't have that female presence of my mom, so it was a place to look for that. And I also, though, didn't have any type of biblical, you know, example of a relationship and how to do that. And so I was just following the world's version, and that led to a lot of, if I'm being honest, mental and emotional abuse that later on manifested itself into a GI issue that I still have to this day. So I have that, and, you know, the decisions, if I'm being honest, there was, you know, engaging in, you know, recreational drugs and just partying and just really just pursuing and desiring all of the things that were nothing that I was familiar with growing up. I mean, I grew up in Chick-shin-y. We didn't even do those things in high school, which I thank the Lord for. But it was in 2 or 3 years alone of just, kind of seeking those things out. For many, they can go on and continue that lifestyle for a long time, but it broke me real quick.
Yeah.
And like I said, those were not things that I knew my dad would have any empathy. He would just criticize me and be like, what are you doing here? You're not smart for doing those things. Whereas if I had my mom, she probably would have talked me out or talked me through these difficult things I was going through. But anyways, God has a plan, right?
He does.
So I'm just grateful that he broke me real quick.
Yeah.
But so my friend gives me this book, 2021. I crack it open, and what the book was about, I almost kind of forget it, and I feel like I want to read it again because it was the first books have played a big role in my building my foundation of my faith and understanding of God, because the Bible, as you know, can, be foreign if you don't really know what you're reading and things. But it was basically just laying out a very intimate roadmap of, a follower of Christ, and what the relationship with the Father kind of looks like, and just really placing a great sense of purpose and pleasure to be found in becoming a saint. That's what it was called.
Right.
And so, from there it's still COVID, and I also moved to Philly. So I think the way that lockdown kind of, slowly disappeared, it was like a few steps behind in Philly because there's a lot more people, there's a lot more institutions there. So even into all the way, I think the summer, maybe even to the fall of 2021, a lot of things were still closed. So as I was reading about this book and I'm learning about the Lord and I wanted to go further, I started to kind of have my own form of church, which was my relationship with God for those, first few months was YouTube sermons, podcasts, books, reading the Bible here and there, taking a crack at prayer. And I see though that, that really had an impact. So that's what I was doing.
That book's a powerful book because it really discusses how we can't go down the path of finding this on our own. Right. It's through grace.
Right.
And they really have an emphasis on grace in that book. But again, it shares with us how we need to live a sanctified life.
Yeah.
But it breaks down that word sanctification. A lot of people don't know the church lingo, and they break it down in a really realistic, practical way to say, hey, you have to turn from this and go down this path if you're following after the Lord. And a lot of it was that personal relationship. How do you have a personal relationship with someone that you can't hear, that you can't see, that you can't touch? And they really go down that path of expanding on those thoughts. It's a powerful book. So you went down the path of following and even adding some other things like the podcast, because I believe they probably didn't have a lot of podcasts back when they wrote that book. But
I just, from there, like, the book showed me that faith was entirely different from what I thought, and
something you had to pursue.
It really just made it clear as to, this relationship that's to exist. Church isn't just, and God isn't just going to church, but it's like, it all really starts in this, this relationship. And so that is when I understood, like, when my friend was first sharing these things with me, the concepts of just God and walking with him, and the forgiveness and the restoration and the, go on and on, all of those different terms that describe God so well. That stood out to me as something for how I was feeling, all that inner turmoil inside when he's sharing those things. I'm like, well, regardless of what that looks like, I still don't have any idea, but what you're telling me sounds like what I need.
Right.
And then from there, though, the book then really started to show me what that looks like, how I do that. And I realized, okay, well,
did you have a thought, this is what my mom was doing?
Yeah, and that's where slowly too, where it's like, and that took lots of time and is still an ongoing thing where I kind of now putting the pieces together of like my mom's life and her relationship with Christ. And, what I say now is like, I if anything, I'm living within the prayers that she prayed for me. I think this is an answered prayer. I know she prayed for, my relationship, with God, and that I would make that my life. So I was connecting those dots, and that's part of the fuel that kept me going. Me and what can come from a relationship with God and why that's important. I'm like, this is what she was doing. It wasn't just church on Sunday singing, in front of the congregation and being a really great person. It was like, no, she was in deep, daily communion and intimacy with the Lord, and everything that she was able to pour out to me and to others was simply what she was receiving from God, and I was understanding how this all worked. So I just kept on, I just kept on, and it was church for me. Like I said, was, in my bedroom, watching YouTube, listening to podcasts, and really just growing a hunger, and it was great. Yeah.
And I find it interesting too, as we draw closer to the Lord, it doesn't mean that we're free necessarily from a lot of the hardship that the world brings, right? Or that circumstances bring. We can still be depressed. Right. We can still have issues with anxiety, focus and attention, all that kind of stuff. It can still impact our lives, but we're trying to give those things to the Lord. Yeah. We're trying to go down the path of saying, God, I'm broken. I just need you to heal me or to help me through the brokenness. Yeah. And you did that. I know there was a period of time when you had some professional experience and you were, correct me if I'm wrong, doing something in the financial world. Yes. But I kind of want to jump over that a little bit. I know there's a lot there to the story, but jump over it a little bit because God then directs you down a path where here you're leaving in a brief period of time. You were able to become very financially successful according to the world standards. Yeah. And you leave that financial comfort to do ministry that God brings your whole life together. Yep. The grief, the trauma, the tragedy, the sports, the physical fitness. Right. And he connects you with a ministry where you're making a fraction, pennies on the dollar compared to what you were doing professionally. Yeah. Tell me about that ministry and how God led you to that and what you did there at that ministry.
Yeah, well, starting from kind of what you just described, where I was with my professional career in that financial job, which what it was is I had a financial advisory business, and that was once again why I even moved down to the area. Wow. There was an office in King of Prussia, Pennsylvania. So yeah, I'm down there. I'm loving the area, and I'm having success, and I'm doing this thing. But it was just a matter of God really revealing to me who He was. Wow. Which now what I understand is when you come to know who God is, you then come to know who you are, and that's what was happening. It was like I was in this job, and all throughout the beginning, time of being in the professional world, there was a lot of focus that had to go on running that business. And so what I'm also spending my free time doing is just like, always tuning into that work, hustle, grind culture, financial knowledge, books. That was like kind of my I don't like to really use the word religion, but that was my religion. That's what I was, that's where I was identifying, and that's where I was just trying to strive towards. But God and in that journey of faith and everything that I was learning about there, and really what was just taking place in my heart, totally overshadowed what I already had going. And God just kind of, redirected me towards where I was meant to go. It was, and that's the thing. And sometimes I, debate and am a little even frustrated when I'm like, I really went to school for something that I recognize now was solely based off of not much of anything. It was like, finance. I know I have some family members that are successful with that, and it'll place me into business, and I'll be able to wear a suit and talk to people. Good enough, right? And I'll do that because I didn't know what else I may have wanted. But as soon as I found God, I realized my heart was, first of all, meant for Him, and it was meant for, serving him.
Right.
And now you could do that, of course, in a financial advisory job. You can.
Sure.
There's plenty of Christians,
for sure.
if not more, in the marketplace than that are in the church and in ministry. But for me, it was very evident that I wanted to be on the front lines. And so, I was just drifting away from that. I also, didn't feel comfortable doing a job every day that was almost preaching to them,
right,
and idolizing retirement and investments and money, because now there are people that that are devout Christians and are really on fire for God, they will go down the path of getting a designation that's called KBA, which is Kingdom Business Advisor.
Sure.
So that was part of it. It was like, okay, well, maybe it's not a matter of I don't like this financial work that I'm doing. Maybe it's just that now as I'm, placing priority and importance on living my life and basing those things in biblical, truth, maybe I could do that. So I did consider, all right, maybe I'll go and get this designation. I'll have to leave the firm that I was with. Mm-hmm. But it's like, if I do continue to do this, I have to be, coaching my clients from a biblical perspective, because otherwise I felt I was lying to them, because it's like, for everything that's in, the Bible about finances, as you know, I heard this somewhere, I don't know if it's true, but money is talked about as much as almost anything else, because it's a tool that God meant for good.
It is.
But it's like, if I'm teaching people about retirement, about investments and insurance and all these things, and I'm not mentioning God, there's going to be an internal conflict within me that I don't like. But I looked briefly at that path of Christian financial advisory, but really, when I was being honest with myself, I could still sense that it wasn't just not doing it the Christian way. It was I wasn't meant to be in this financial role. There's too much admin, too much emails, too much things that were not for me. I wanted to be part of something that was strictly rooted in God. So I'm starting to look at jobs, and one pops up, I remember, and it was for director of development at a ministry called the Parksburg Point, which
that's awesome.
Parksburg, for anyone that is familiar with the area, King of Prussia is right outside of Philly, and then Lancaster is about an hour, west.
Yeah.
Parksburg was wedged right in between the two.
Wow.
So I was living in King of Prussia at the time, and it was at least seemingly feasible to, hey, if I get this job, I can make this work for the time being, and we'll see where it goes.
Sure.
But the kind of the cooler part of that is I find the job, and I'm like, all right, well, what's this organization? It sounds awesome. It's a Christian community center. They got all this awesome stuff for the kids. So I go to the website, and on the website I see that at this time, this was in the fall of 2021, that they had their fall event, coming up, which was something they did to raise funds because they were a nonprofit organization. But specifically, what this event was around was they were having a guest speaker, and who that was Dallas Jenkins, the producer of The Chosen, which that in itself to me was cool, because I was watching The Chosen. That was actually a huge piece of building my faith too, was like watching Jesus and the Bible be played out. But nonetheless, that was exciting. I was like, all right, well, I definitely would love to go, even just to hear this guy talk and have that opportunity. But secondly, I'm like, so this guy, knowing who he is and what he does, The Chosen's getting big. I'm like, he's coming all the way out to Parksburg, Pennsylvania. I'm sure he's got to be busy. And so that intrigued me, and I was like, all right, I'm going to go to this. I want to listen to Dallas Jenkins, but why I really knew I was going to go is because I would be able to probably, find the executive director, which is basically the manager, the head of the place, who I had understood who that was by going on their website and seeing him. His name was Dwayne. And so I went to the event. It was the same exact week, too, that I found the job listing that event was going on. I think it was maybe a Tuesday that I found the listing, and then it was a Friday or Saturday that this event was taking place. So I bought the ticket, I went, and I did hear, of course, Dallas Jenkins speak and his testimony and everything, but I also shook the hand and introduced myself to Dwayne, the executive director. And the very first thing he said to me was, oh, perhaps, you are the guy that I've been praying for. I need this role filled, but let's talk more. So we did that, and one thing led to another. I was hired for this job as the development director, leading the charge to raise the funds for this organization, which I had no experience in, and it's something that I came to understood was very important to have experience, but they took a chance on me. And so that was in November of 2022. I got hired and then worked there all the way until May of 2023, where I was eventually let go, but for the right reasons. And so Dwayne was, the executive director of that organization, but he's also a pastor and just a God-fearing man, definitely led by the Holy Spirit. And so he eventually came to the point where he let me go because he could sense that I was still operating out of my calling and in the way that God, designed me.
Right.
And he was right.
Yeah.
Because I remember when we sat down, I was crushed by the news because it was completely out of the blue. We had just entered into May. We had just had our huge spring event, which raised a lot of money. I was actually very much so on pace to raise the funds that we needed to raise, and I was doing it all by, the grace of God, and honestly just by,
it's amazing,
piecing it together and go firing from the hip. But that wasn't the reason. It wasn't, hey, you're doing terrible, we want to let you go. He's just, hey, I could see that God has something for you. It certainly could be at an organization like this, but as far as this role goes and how important it is to our organization, we have to let you go, and I think it'll be best for the both of us. And he was right. And so what was really hard about that was that I loved the point. I loved being a part of that ministry. So from there,
but God had been birthing something in your life.
Yeah.
And it wasn't less ministry, it was more ministry.
Yeah.
And so God led you up here back to your hometown, right? And God has been working in you to develop this whole concept that you shared with me, which is Bibles and barbells. Now, I know you may not stick with that name. That's a really cool name. But God's using you.
Yeah.
And the word I get from everybody that meets you, and I've met a lot of people that have met you outside of this office.
I didn't know that.
They're all shocked, but they're so enriched and refreshed by your testimony because you're going around and witnessing to a whole bunch of different people. Some of those people may even be Christians.
Yeah.
But you're sharing your faith with boldness.
Yeah.
And you're not compromising.
Yeah.
And it's refreshing and shocking because I know you're not young, but you're young. You're young.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And
that's I'm a baby Christian. I'm a young guy anyways, but I'm a baby in the faith.
So you're on fire.
Yeah.
You're going down this path of not being ashamed or afraid. It doesn't matter to you.
No.
But God's laid this ministry on your heart, and He's putting the pieces together for you. It may not be going as fast as you want.
Yeah.
I think you wanted to go like a Ferrari or a Lamborghini.
Yeah, just because I know.
A little bit, pick up the pace here, God. I'm ready,
Right.
But He takes us down this path, and just like He did when you were 17 years old, and He developed you, right? And He saw you through every step of the way. He's putting all the pieces together. And sometimes those pieces don't move as fast as we want them to.
Right.
But He's putting the pieces together for a higher reason.
Yeah.
We don't know what it is. We don't know what it's going to be.
Right.
But I'm so blessed to be a part of it.
Yeah.
I'm so blessed to come alongside and be that support along with others.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Your mom, even your dad, even your siblings, your best friend, right? And a special person that God placed in your life, right? This fiance of yours, right? God placed her in your life. God's bringing it all together, right? Tell me a little bit about your fiance, then tell me a little bit about this ministry that God has birthed inside of you.
Yeah. I'll pick up from where I left off, but also as you were kind of alluding to, just the desire for ministry and the heart for God that I had developed through all this, these couple years thus far. So when I'm let go at the ministry, like I said, it was super crushing because I loved the organization, but I was very relieved, and I felt that in my spirit for sure, because it was a new role and a new type of job, but it was still financial, it was still office based, and that's what I realized I was not meant for. And so I remember very vividly they were letting me go. They'd say, hey, we're going to take care of you we know this is out of the blue, you
Right.
know, and we're, you know, torn to have to do this, but, you know, we understand and you understand what's going on. And so we'll take care of you for 5 weeks with severance pay. And if you need anything, you know, we're here for you to help you, you know,
Right.
to what's next. So in those 5 weeks, I just remember that having that job been kind of, once again, super exhausting and challenging
Right.
because it just was not aligned with my skill set. I was so convicted that, okay, well, watching these 2 different jobs that I poured everything into and still find myself out, you know, with them behind me, you know, if I was being honest too, probably what my mind was saying is, having failed in both of these opportunities, it's clear to me that God made me a certain way, and I am most, you know, concerned about whatever I do next, it being aligned with
Right.
these things that I know, these passions that I have, and not something here. So the first thing that I did is like, I need to get close with God, and I need to take some time in these few weeks and not make it instantly about, oh my gosh, I'm losing this job, I got to go get another one, I got to find this thing. And there was parts of me that was still obsessing about it, but all in all, I made the decision like, all right, I've been let go today. I'm not going right home and getting right on, you know, the internet and trying to find the next job. They're telling me they're going to take care of me for a little bit in these few weeks. The first thing I'm doing is take a breather,
Right.
and go see God and spend time. So that's what I did, and I remember it was like those 5 months or 5 weeks, and continued on from there of just literally just reading my Bible at a pace I never had before. Not for any reason other than it was just, I had the time finally, you know. I was not overwhelmed with all of these other responsibilities, and I just did that. And he, from there, just really started to just, you know, pour on, you know, all of the things I was already coming to terms with, but really making that clear to me.
Wow.
But the biggest thing was, it was like, you don't need to be a part of the Point or any ministry at all to be a part of Jesus' ministry. And so I remember what I was doing specifically, aside from deciding, hey, I'm going to seek God hard in this time so that he directs me, because I was just so concerned, not just of doing what I wanted, but what I wanted was what he wanted. And I was like, I don't discredit these experiences. I see that they have purpose. They have to. But it wasn't, obviously the outcomes aren't what I expected.
Yeah.
But so I'm going to seek God and really make sure that I go the direction he wants. So we don't have to do this and have this experience again. Now, is that what necessarily happened? No. But at the same time, yes, because like I said, he showed me your purpose is universal. It's continual.
Right.
You know, striving to be in relationship with me and to, you know, live a life that is pleasing to me. You can do that anywhere, in anything. So I heard him, I acknowledged it, but I was still, of course, like, all right, but we're going to find this job. We're going to find this thing. And all of what he's telling me is going to be true, but it's also going to be lived out in this next role that I have for work. But it didn't go that way. I didn't find the job that I was looking for, and still haven't. But I was just convicted of the fact that, well, if he places this job in my lap and this thing I'm sensing is out there for me, or he takes me some crazy path, the one thing I'm going to do no matter what is make it all about him. And that's what ended up happening. I remember part of the summer was I started to, like, you know, flea market and thrift, and I was doing reselling. And I at that time, and this time I haven't shared with you, but I had this concept of creating a ministry, perhaps that started by this reselling stuff. And I even made a logo. I was even doing it, but it wasn't formalized, but I called it Clutter for Christ. And the idea was to, you know, because I was in this, you know, Philly kind of area where there's a lot of people and there's plenty of stuff. And so I started to do that, actually. But once again, in the midst of people coming to me to buy things or sell me things, or me going out to meet them, or whatever the case was, it was that I was still very aware of sharing the Lord in those pursuits, because my idea was like, you know, stuff, clutter, materials can be a blessing to those who don't have, but they also can be a burden to those who have too many, or that put all of their value in those things. So I just was like, okay, maybe I'll do this as a business and I'll turn it into a ministry, and the idea will just to, like, positively impact the relationship that people have with their belongings. And so I was doing that, and I was not making money that was enough to pay the bills. So I still had that pressure of, hey, even if this really is the thing God has for me, which I was slightly convinced it may have been, I'm still going to have to find a job. And so that was still a struggle, and it was hard, and it was stressful, and And so I took a role that didn't even pay my bills as a Christian camp counselor for school-age kids.
Okay.
Because once again, the passion was still like, I'm trying to be in an atmosphere that is the Lord no matter what. That job was insane, honestly. It was crazy, but it was fun. And I was still in a place where, I could share the Lord and I could lead with that. And so without getting into all the details of it, that could be a podcast in itself. I did that for 2 months. Yeah. And then I get through that, and I'm back once again to the drawing board of still don't have the for sure job, the long-term, well-paying job that's going to allow me to stay here. I'm either going to force myself back into a financial role that gives me an income that is suitable for my financial needs and the lifestyle I had set up based off of once having a business that was very abundant, to now I'm like, I'm either going to do something that's going to probably result in the same outcomes as these other jobs, go do a financial analyst job or a sales job, and I'm like, I'm not going to do that to myself, though. I just was like, but I know that would be the immediate means to at least relieving myself of this financial pressure, but my convictions around following, a calling and being in an atmosphere or a job that was much so aligned with my passions, which was kids, mental health, teaching, the Lord, psychology, whatever it was, those were the new things. But I realized I'm either going to have to start at a ground zero job and probably still not make enough money to do what I needed to do, or it was going to require some time and probably some additional money to go get education or certifications that would allow me to enter, those industries. And so all in all, it's almost September, and I'm like, I still don't see no jobs are falling in my lap.
But he's putting it together.
Yeah, he's putting it together. Well, he was.
Pieces together.
He was.
And he's getting you connected with some people. Now tell me about your fiance. Tell me a little bit about her.
Well, she's been a part of the journey the whole time. Really, I came to the Lord, like I said, 2021, and we met each other in like the fall of September of 2021. And what was interesting is that, even like I said, I gave my life to Christ in March of 2021. There are those growing pains, that initial phase of trying to really walk with the Lord and turn away and die to yourself and to your old ways of living and step into the new. It's different for everybody, but the one thing that I know is it's challenging for everybody because you have no idea what you're doing. You're still just so bound to the ways that you once were. And so I was hashing that all out from March to September and when we met. And when we met, I found that she was kind of in a similar place. We were both still in the world, but like a half step out the door of the world into, this life of Christ. And so, without all the details, that could be a podcast in itself, but her and I have, in a very just interesting way, at a distance too, because not only was she someone I never knew, but she was from an area that I had no, I had no connection to. We did actually meet, kind of online in a sense, and from there though, we strung together this relationship, and we've both grown so much, and we both have still so much growing to do. But I've watched her transform, drastically, and I know that she has helped me see so many things about myself, as a partner, as a man, and as a Christian, and has challenged me and has kept me, on that path. And
she's wanting to do ministry with you too.
Yeah, I think that,
which is pretty incredible.
Yeah, her vision and her desires can very much so fit into ministry. I don't think it's as evident and clear and passionate like it is for me, but that's because she's just not sure where her passions of kids and becoming a teacher and dance and theater and all of these things that she did, much like my sports and things that you've mentioned. She just knows that that's what she has to offer. That's what makes her happy, but also though that she wants to do those things to honor the Lord. And so, I think our conversations, these last few months, we've gotten to the brink of many possibilities, and the constant though has been ministry and a nonprofit perhaps for me or whatever. And she's going to be entering into that conversation with us come this week. But for what I'm looking to do with fitness and with youth and with church, And with kids, her passions could very much so align super well, and I'm really just waiting to see, that happen and how that happens, and really getting her to the same place of like assurance and conviction that's what she wants to do as well. But yeah, I'm very excited. I think
God's not finished, right?
No, he hasn't really even begun. But He's laid the groundwork, and taught me all of the things that I think are necessary to prepare me to be able to go out and do ministry and some of these things that we've been discussing, doing them well. Because he had to just teach me those growing pains of what it's like to be in relationship with him, and I think just test my heart to see where I'm at. So, like I would say, is all of my pursuits leading up to this point, especially after, being go from the ministry, it has all just been submitting to his will for me, and it has not been the things that I would say are what I was hoping for or wanting, except for him. He's been a constant, and I was like, powerful. Lord, I'll do what you want, and I'll let you lead the way, no matter what it's through. And I know that that's because I was for sure, and still am sure, that it's gonna lead eventually to the thing, to the calling. And I think we're getting close to that time. You are, but we'll see. But that's briefly, but in long-winded form, kind of the last 3 years, if you will. Like my baptize anniversary, you could say, was actually last week. Awesome. It's been 3 years with the Lord, and what that feels like in comparison to 21, 22 years of just living in the world. I mean, it feels like, so much transformation takes place with the Lord, true transformation, internal transformation, that I really am an entirely new person. And it's only just begun. And so I look forward to everything.
Beautiful plan and purpose for your life. And he's going to see that through as you stay faithful to him. And maybe you're like Andrew. Maybe you faced intense grief, and that intense grief has caused you to go down a path where you're questioning, you're hurting, you feel like you're falling apart. But God can be very close to you. He can wrap his loving wings around you. He can hold you very close to him. And he can take you down a path where you can grow in him if you would choose to follow after him, like Andrew did. Andrew made a choice, and that choice was life-changing for him. And it doesn't mean that we won't have hardship, we won't have persecution, we won't suffer. All those things are a part of life, and God's word tells us that we'll go down that path. But if you give your all to him, he's going to see you through. He's going to provide. He's going to bring people along your path to encourage, to build you up, and to steer you in a right direction. You just have to listen, and you have to go down the path of following through on what the Lord is trying to say through others. And I'm so proud of Andrew. I'm proud that he's been able to go down this path of following after the Lord and sticking with the Lord and serving the Lord with all of his heart, soul, mind, and strength. And I know God has a plan for him, a plan to prosper him. And he'll prosper Andrew. But can you give your all to the Lord no matter what the difficulty is, so the Lord can prosper you? That's the question. But that's the beginning of a resurgent life. That's the beginning of hope. And God's story isn't a completed story. It's not a completed story until we meet him face to face. Like Andrew's mom, she gave her heart to the Lord, served the Lord even in the midst of cancer treatment. And the beautiful story is that she's now with the Lord, where there's no more hurt, there's no more pain, there's no more suffering, there's no more hardship. And she left behind a legacy in her son Andrew. And Andrew is taking that legacy and serving the Lord himself. What a beautiful story. I hope that's your story. Thank you for watching the Speak Hope Now podcast.